Left in Kentucky, the podcast of Indivisible, Northern Kentucky. Welcome to episode 2 of Left in Kentucky. Welcome to 2020. Hope your year has started off well.
Woohoo!
Woo.
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year indeed. And we're here with yours truly, Roberto Henriquez. And as always, Ann Dickerson.
Hey, everybody.
And the lovely and talented Miss Amy Ferguson.
Yes, I'm trying not to be edited. Wish me
That's
luck.
That's my job.
What kind of monster would edit you? Oh, wait, that was me.
I was going to say, I'm the queen of getting edited. What are you talking about?
Oh, too funny. So, got exciting stuff coming up. I get so excited for these podcasts. Don't you guys?
I do. It's actually the fun part of my week. I look forward to this because I know no matter what else is going on, I'm going to come here and it's going to be fun.
Yeah, my cheeks always hurt from smiling when I leave.
Or trying to stifle a laugh.
That's the best part. One of these days we're going to videotape us doing this.
Yeah.
So you can see the
won't.
shenanigans that go on behind the scenes. Everybody trying not to laugh too loud into the microphones. It's quite a good time.
Or when you got to cough and you got to hide it.
Yeah. So today's episode, we have not one guest, but 2 guests for you.
Woohoo.
That's right. 2 for the price of 1. Very exciting. In our first guest segment, we'll be speaking with Mr. Buddy Wheatley, State Representative representing District 65. And he'll be giving us he'll be giving us a preview of the 2020 General Assembly. And then after that, we'll be talking with Mr. Jason Griffith, who will be discussing the expanded gaming issue, as well as some thoughts on the new Secretary of State purging the voter rolls. So you'll want to stay tuned for that. It'll be quite exciting. But before that, we have everybody's favorite segment, Cow Patties. All right, Amy, why don't you start us off? Who's your cow patty for today?
You know, I always say they're always stinkier than last time, and it seems that's true. Every time we come back to it, they just smell a little bit worse. So yesterday I had the pleasure of listening to constituents in Northern Kentucky air their grievances to the legislators at the legislative forum. And I want to say that my cow patty goes to Damon Thayer. Oh. And, the representatives and senators didn't speak much, but he had something to say at the end. And basically it was against the red flag law. And he said that the gun grabbers can come through me if they want to pass that law. And I think that's kind of disingenuous from Mr. Thayer. And so he gets my cow patty.
He said so much. He said so much other stuff. There were so many things you could give him a cow patty for.
I mean, he did.
It was quite terrifying.
We don't have that much time.
Yeah. So anyway, okay, Miss Ann.
I guess this award's going to have to be a little longer, a little runnier, and a big D because it's the second week in a row that I'm tagging Thomas Massey.
Double shot.
That's juicy.
Let me tell you what. There might be, but for my money, there is no bigger purveyor of just garbage propaganda he uses fear to spread fear, to induce people to continue doing just crazy things. And so he's finally decided to pay attention to the fact that he lives in the state of Kentucky.
What?
I know. He knows we're here. And you know how he knows we're here? Because we have this crazy thing going on with all these counties wanting to, pushing the Republicans who have the commissions, have the fiscal courts sewn up, for the various counties, especially in District 4. And so they're pushing for these sanctuary counties for the Second Amendment, which is hilarious. I find it funny that, it's the Second Amendment, and they feel they feel compelled to get a special law passed that says that nobody can take that away, but at the same time, the very same party is actively working to take away your designated right to vote.
Yeah.
So, it's only a one-way street thing with them. It's only when it's in their favor or they're interested in it do they care about you and your individual guaranteed right. If it's not, then they want to take it away. They don't care. So he gets my double whammy this week for that. Because he's actively on social media supporting every single county, and he, is backing this in his district. It's the first. I never even knew he realized how many counties were in his district, because God knows he's never visited them all.
Yeah, I think somebody probably told him, counted it for him.
They did. On his Twitter page,
yeah.
Somebody actually posted the date and time of each one of the fiscal court meetings for each county in his district.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I guess Pendleton County just passed it last week.
So did Lewis.
In Lewis County. It's coming up in Boone County.
And Bracken. Where else? It's also in Oldham County, and I want to say Grant County, Henry County. It's spreading, but what I find really funny, they're going to wait until the end to try to pull the more purpley blue areas, which is going to be Campbell County and Kenton County, and I don't know that they'll get them.
Yeah, hope not. So anyway, I think that excellent award there. So I think it's the first time we've had the same person 2 episodes in a row.
I don't know. I think I did Mitch twice in a row once.
Well, we'll see what happens the next time, considering all the other batshit crazy stuff that's going on in Washington, because he'll do something that'll get the award.
Yeah. So, speaking of batshit crazy.
You have bats in your belfry.
My Cow Patty Award goes to John Schickel. So this week...
what now?
This week, he wrote an op-ed this past week that talking about the federal family leave that was just signed into law, and stating that was the first step to socialism.
John Schickel wouldn't know socialism if it jumped up and bit him in the ass. And the proof of that is the fact that every job that man has ever had has been a socialist job paid for by the government. Hello?
Yeah.
I mean, he worked for 2 different police departments, and now he's in the Kentucky State Legislature. Does he think the money for those jobs just comes out of thin air? No, it's paid for by taxes. It's a socialist job.
Yeah, my guess is he's also driven on an interstate at some point in his life.
Right.
Which was also a socialist.
Right. They just
Let's
throw
all agree.
this word around, and people, the fear.
Socialism!
Yeah, and they don't know what it means.
Boogity, boogity, boogity.
Fear leads to the dark side.
Right.
Remember that,
it
folks.
Falls right under. I mean, they all do it, and Thomas Massey's just the king of it. Fear breeds fear.
Yep.
And when you combine it with ignorance, that's when everything goes off the rails. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Absolutely. So yeah, those are our cow patties for this.
And well-deserved, all of them.
Well-deserved cow patties. And for our next segment here in Lefton, Kentucky, we are going to be talking with State Representative Buddy Wheatley, who represents the 65th District, which is Covington and surrounding areas, but not South Covington, right?
That's correct.
But he's joining us today, and he's going to be giving us an overview of what to look forward to in the upcoming General Assembly session, which gavels in Tuesday, which should be today because that's when we'll publish this podcast. So welcome, buddy.
Well, thank you, Roberto. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always been a pleasure to know the people around Indivisible, District 4, and I look forward to it.
Great.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the district, the 65th district, which is all of Covington inside of 275, all of Ludlow, most of Park Hills, all of Kentonvale, all 60 people or so. And,
Hey, I canvassed there. I know
Right.
exactly where every house is.
I have two good friends who live in Kentonvale.
Yes, we do.
Yep.
I have at least 60 now. who live in
Mike and
Kentonville.
Mike. They're a really nice couple.
Okay. Yes, and thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and just go right into these issues that are important. We're talking about the 2020 session that's coming up, and I can safely say that I have no idea because I've never been in a budget session before. This is my first term, my first budget session, but it is extremely important. We express our priorities, our values in our budget. And the state of Kentucky has had some very tight, tough budgets over the last 10 years, especially since the Great Recession. And while a lot of states are coming out of this, we're still dealing with some structural imbalances related to not having the revenue that we need. And we need lots of revenue for these important programs that are both in our statutes that we must provide to the citizens, and it's a moral obligation, in my view. So, anyway, with the budget coming up, we will be passing a 2-year budget. It's about a budget with about $12 billion in income in revenues, I should say, and structurally, it looks like we need closer to $14 or $15 billion to cover the things, and as we talk about the important issues to Kentucky, we have a lot of ongoing structural things that makes the budget increase, and one everybody will be familiar with is our pension system, because the recent special session, we again gave all the quasi organizations a pass on the amount of the ARC that they're supposed to pay. Now that just falls back to the whole state. So that's another $121 million that we previously weren't really counting on in the next budget as being part of a cost we have to cover.
Okay, so to make sure I understand that, because of the pass you gave the quasi agencies in the special session in 2019, that money though still has to come from somewhere.
Yes, the money does have to come from somewhere, and it has to come from the state.
Okay.
There are different options. Because of the special sessions, there are different options for the quasi-governmental agencies, whether they want to stay in the system or stay out. We actually have some very interesting pension legislation that's going to provide even another option that's coming. We believe it's going to be introduced by a bipartisan group of us who work during the off time here, the interim, and it's a pretty good bill. It provides more protections and a better option that we think the quasi organizations will have something to look at that will keep them from having to make some really tough decisions when it comes to getting out of the pension system. And from what I hear and what we're hearing from many of them is they don't want to get out. So we've got this system getting ready to start. It's called an actual liability system, where people are going to be paying what they individually as an organization owe, according to their pension obligations. Right now, it's just set up in a way that everybody pays whatever their ARC is, and we're sort of all put in the pot together, and then everybody gets a certain percentage of their, like we currently was at 85 or 83%. That's going to be going up to 95%. Anyway, that's getting into the pensions. I can go in great detail about that. There's a bill that's coming out that's going to be a bipartisan bill, and it has another option for our quasi-governmental organizations. But that was an example of some of the things that are happening that are part of these obligations, and that's not even to mention the school safety bill, which passed last session, which has more than $100 million. It's not obligated, but that's how much the school safety bill is going to cost.
Just to clarify for our listeners,
Sure.
what a quasi-organization is, they may not be familiar with the term.
Okay, quasi-governmental agencies. The Kentucky has a pension system that includes several different systems within the pension system. There's a separate system for the judicial branch and legislative branch. They're in one. There's a teachers' pension system. There's a state pension system for all the state workers. Now, of the state workers, some of those organizations do a lot of state functions that are set up through statute that they must be done through our health departments, our rape crisis centers, our organizations, everything from like the Kentucky Bar Association to the Kentucky High School Athletic Association. These are quasi-governmental organizations that do state functions, and their employees are part of the pension system. So those are the organizations that really are going to have trouble, and they've told us that some are going to go out. They cannot provide services, and for our health departments, that's obviously a great concern. It's a concern for all of those organizations, but particularly our health department. So getting back to the budget, I know that's what we're talking about. We do have these structural deficiencies. We need more revenue to pay for the important things like our health care, our Medicaid expansion. We are expanding, as we know. We're all happy. That's me clapping.
Yeah.
That the governor did do away with the waiver attempt. So, what people need to understand about the Medicaid waiver is that we will bump up to our full participation cost is 20%, but it will never go above that. So that increase is not that great from the current amount, and I don't know exactly what it is, but I think we're going from 17.5% up to 20%. And that is our contribution. So that amount was in about the $20 million increase. Again, this is a structural required amount that we're going to have to come up with. We're talking about the priorities, and the priorities in education, as we know, this governor has made that a priority. He's promised a raise. He's promised to go back to get as close back to full funding as possible. Economic development, I consider economic development, development in our workers and our workforce. I support a raise in the minimum wage, and I think with the dollars getting spent, just like the health care dollars that come in from Medicaid, these dollars that go into the people who will be the beneficiaries of minimum wage increases, which increases wages across the board,
right,
and more than just our lowest paid workers. It puts more dollars into the economy. And
a couple of questions about the budget that I have,
okay,
and some of our listeners may have too. So the governor is going to present a budget, but what does that actually mean? He presents a budget. Here's how much money I think we should spend and what we should spend it on.
It's a great question. And for a freshman legislator, it's a learning curve for me also. But here's what happens, and it happens in this fashion, and it's set up through statute and through our Constitution, that the governor does present the budget to the House, presents it in the House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives can take that budget. This is sort of the same thing that happens on the federal level, and they can completely pass it that way, or they can make adjustments to it as they usually do. Sometimes they might say it's dead on arrival, and we're going to change everything. From the House, it goes to, we pass a budget. The requirement that the governor have a budget to the House is, I believe, in late February. That budget must be received in the House. The House has however long it wants to take, to pass its budget, its version of the budget. It goes to the Senate. The Senate manipulates it. They massage it a little bit more. They manipulate and massage, and then from there, if their budget is different than what we passed in the House, it's just like a regular bill. We have a conference committee, and it gets decided on it. And hopefully, during that conference committee, this hasn't always been done in the past, that they'll be consulting with the governor's office to say, okay, we're thinking about changing this. We all get together, bring all the stakeholders together, and say, are we good with this? We good with this? And it's really, we are at a disadvantage here. And I say we as, I'm a member of the Democratic Party, and there's a super majority in the House and the Senate. So, we get our say. We'll be there to have our say. But in the end, we're going to be dealing with a budget where we're going to have a Democratic governor who's going to present it. It's going to get moved around a little bit, and then it has to come back to the governor. And he has line item veto in our budget system. So line item, he could, the budget line items, there might be thousands of them. He can make changes to any line item he wants. And we go through, after The budget passes the House, it passes the Senate. We go through a conference committee. We come up with a bill that it again has to pass the House and the Senate, and then goes to the governor for that line item veto. We go out of session for a little while, and we come back into session. They call that the veto session, and we deal with those areas that we want to make changes if there's any vetoes to be overridden. And in the state of Kentucky, which is has one of the, I guess you could call it the most liberal veto powers, or not liberal veto powers for the governor, it just takes a simple majority to override one of his vetoes.
Really? It's a simple majority?
A simple majority. So it only would take 51 votes in the House and 19 votes in the Senate.
Even when it deals with money, I thought the issues that dealt with the budget and money were different.
Well, there is, for the off year, I know that there is a 60 vote requirement if you're going to affect the budget. But and this is my first session. I think everything in the session, in the year that you're voting on a budget, that it's a majority. It's a majority vote.
So that brings up an interesting question. Since overriding a veto is a simple majority vote, then what advantage is the supermajority that the Republicans keep talking about?
Well, primarily the supermajority is effective during the off session. Those years that take 60 votes in the House and whatever the supermajority number is in the Senate, I think it might be 23, to pass bills that affect the budget.
Okay.
So that's the supermajority advantage, and the only one that I'm aware of, but it's an important one, obviously. And they have that. And they, what's interesting, and last session was very interesting with the House being 61 Republicans and 39 Democrats. That 61 made it very close, and there were a lot of things that the House leadership and the governor's office preferred to do, but there was a handful of Republicans who would be on our side, at least be pushing. At least they had enough say within their own caucus. Again, they're not necessarily working with the Democrats, but they're within their own caucus saying they're not afraid to take votes with us, and they weren't. And there were several times that happened, and that happened enough to give them a little power to have that supermajority. Again, that supermajority wasn't always exercised, but when that small group of Republicans made it known that they will take that, that they'll take those votes that might not give them the supermajority for the things they really want it for.
Right. Okay. So I know that there's been hundreds of pre-filed bills,
Yes.
and there will be significantly more bills filed once the session gavels in. But I think one of the bills that I think you have is related to vaping and Juuls, and I was wondering if you could talk to that, especially given with what's recently happened federally with Trump.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Over the summer, the vaping epidemic really made news, and some unfortunate news. We've had now we're over 200 deaths related to vaping this year, and before even that started, I was, as part of the pension group, I was part of some meetings related to public health, and there's going to be a change in our public health delivery and how that's funded. So I was part of some meetings related to that. And this vaping issue was being talked about, sort of on the side. And my wife is very much involved in public health herself. So I was interested in it. I recognized that, the numbers that were coming back, especially related to youth and the addiction level and what was happening with Kentucky youth especially, it was very concerning. And the attraction to flavors was particularly concerning to me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's other parts of the vaping issue that are important. The raising the age to 21, a tax on vaping, restricting the sales of cartridges, how you can buy them, online purchasing. All that was important to me, and I was paying attention and in communication with some of the other legislators who were working on this legislation. But an all-out ban on flavors was not quite part of anybody else's bill, and I said let's do it. Let's have this part of the legislation. At this time, the federal FDA rule had been discussed, but it hadn't gone into place yet.
Mm-hmm.
So very recently, the FDA did come out with their regulation, a rule that's going to take effect in about 30 days. where they ban all flavors except for menthol, I believe.
Yep.
There's some ways that there are also there are some waivers that companies can get out of this, and there's also the availability of buying the flavors in person in stores and I think in the large quantities. There are some ways that you can get around the FDA regulations. So my bill is still a good bill to do. What the FDA just passed probably covers about 80 to 90% of what I was trying to accomplish. But with this current vaping epidemic, we were making such great progress with our kids and smoking, but we are addicting a whole new generation of our young kids to nicotine, and it's a lifetime addiction. And early addiction wires the brain for addiction, so they're susceptible to other addictions at the time, and there's just so many health risks. And the vaping association people contact me. I will listen to them, and they're saying, there's jobs that are going to be lost, and there's an industry here that does good because it helps with smoking cessation. You have to take the good with the bad. So you have to say, the smoking cessation success versus what it's doing to addicting our kids.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it far outweighs the good when we ban these flavors, and we make them not so attractive for kids. Kids are highly attracted to the flavors. There was a White House roundtable. The current guy in the White House actually did a pretty decent job in this round table where he had some of the leading industry people. And the Juul spokesperson said that when they took it upon themselves to ban the flavors except for menthol. When they banned all that, 70% of the kids went from those flavors to menthol. And then when they said that they were going to ban, they were getting ready to ban, they did ban menthol. They took out all flavors. 97% of their poll was that was what the kids were interested. So after that, my bill would ban all flavors, but tobacco flavor is still permitted. So we would be, those are anecdotal evidence. That is anecdotal evidence. There's been some other very strong evidence done by studies in in Ohio, where we're seeing like they're thinking about a 70% reduction would happen with the banning of flavors of kids.
Okay, well, good. Hopefully you'll get some traction on that.
I have that bill, and I have another bill related to pensions, and it's related to beneficiaries and qualifying events. It's something. It's to be a freshman in the minority and in the House of Representatives, it's not easy to get a piece of legislation moved. I was able to get an interim hearing on my bill, which was neat to do.
Nice.
There's being a legislator down there, it's tough work. When you're in the minority, but building relationships, which I feel like I'm still doing and need to do, is helpful. My priorities in the budget probably are not the priorities at all of the supermajority.
Right.
But when you build relationships and you can talk about these things with civility, and you bring the stakeholders to the table, and they're willing to, you get a couple people to listen to you. And I've had some success at that. I hope to have more success at it. And then we just start to nudge away to things that we think are important.
Yeah. So in the last couple of minutes here in this segment, so last couple of sessions, obviously, the pensions were a big issue, and there was a lot of activation of groups to let their desires be known and to contact people down in Frankfort. I guess is there anything this session that you think people need to be ready to act on?
Yes.
And that would be
dun, dun, dun.
The teachers. And I say that it's no secret that the majority floor leader in the Senate has expressed desire to go to some type of cash balance system for the teachers' pension for future teachers. I think it's a terrible idea. I've expressed to him how I don't think it's a great idea, and that maybe if he'd give me a chance to look at the legislation, we might be able to work together. We'll see if that happens. But his bill has not been introduced. It's not one of the pre-filed bills. But I would imagine that it's something that the teachers need to keep their ears open for. I can speak with real experience about this related to going to a defined benefit system, and that's what's happened in the fire service and with the police and fire. Our first responders, we're having horrendous. We're just, it's terrible how we cannot recruit and retain the best and the bravest for police and fire right now. We're having trouble filling positions all over the state. The state police are having trouble filling positions. There's different theories as to why. I think it's because we went away from a defined benefit pension, and we need to reinstate it. And I look forward to and I'll state it publicly here. You'll probably see legislation on that sometime in the future. We may not be quite ready for it yet. So if they go the same route with teachers, we're going to have the same thing. We're going to have a system where you're going to get hired one day and you have no idea what your pension's going to be when you retire. You just don't know what that cash balance is going to be when you retire. If you get hired today as a teacher, and everybody should know that the teachers in Kentucky still have a defined benefit system. So if you work a certain amount of years, you're going to have a certain amount of percentage per year that you're going to get on your pension, and it's a retirement security for the rest of your life. And that's the best system. It attracts the brightest and the bravest and our best employees, and we need that. So that's potentially going away. And I'll give this other brief anecdote. Somebody I know very well was over at NKU and ran into a student, and the student was an education. They just had a casual conversation. The student said, "Oh yeah, I'm an education major. I'm graduating this year," and she was asked, "Oh yeah, where are you from? You from Kentucky?" "Yeah, I'm from Kentucky." Where are you looking to put in your applications?" "I'm not staying in Kentucky," she said.
Wow.
She said, "The pensions is just killing us." And as of yet, it's not happened. But it's already out there scaring away Kentucky's brightest teachers, and we're losing them.
All righty. So
I want to say one thing real quick before you end
No.
this. What?
Hey, we got Ann to be that quiet for that long.
Hey,
I know,
I was
right?
good. I listened the whole time. It seems to me that, especially given that this is a budget year, I know I personally feel this way, and I bet you I could bring a couple thousand friends, 10,000 friends along that feel the same. All roads keep circling back to the same thing. It's this wag the dog era, and I personally am sick of it. And all the people that I talked to when I went out and canvassed almost 10,000 doors this past year, it didn't matter if they were Republican, Democrat, or Independent. Everybody's pretty much in agreement. So I think there's a lack of understanding of what's going on in the constituency with the people in Frankfort, because people are fed up with the constant friction, the constant battles, back to the same issue over and over. It's like, how many times can you beat a dead horse? It's time to make some changes. And one of the biggest to me is something that you said, which is revenue. We have to have new revenue. And for Stivers or Thayer or anybody else to automatically slam the door before it's even tapped on and say, we won't do this, is just, for lack of a better phrase, batshit crazy. We can't afford to close any door when they're the ones who are willing to pay us these unfunded mandates. For example, now, it's, like you said, it's not a mandate yet, but the school
Safety
Act. We don't have the money. And now you've got, all these groups, for example, the school tax credit group.
Yeah.
Okay, they're back again this year. 3 years in a row.
They're back and loud.
Can we burn those yellow scarves once and for all? We don't have the money.
We are afraid. We need to be bold. Kentucky is far behind in many areas of
Word.
potential revenue.
Yes.
The ones that are obvious and that are out there, from gaming revenue and cannabis revenue, and that's. I'm a realist also.
Yeah.
So let me do that. Medical marijuana and gaming are not going to solve all the pension problems, but they're going to help.
Well, but here's my thing, and I know you do this too, so that's okay, because this crosses party lines. The recreational marijuana, first off...
I don't do that.
No.
That's okay.
You know what
Buddy's
I meant.
eyes are not red.
No. I meant that a lot of legislators tap dance that line. They'll go to the point of medical, but not recreational type of a deal.
I'm for recreational.
Okay, good. Because I thought you were one of the in-betweeners. So I'm glad to know that you're not. But here's the thing. Our farmers need help. They're being tariffed out. Pendleton County in particular, which is a part of District 4, took a huge hit with soybeans. You have all of these other areas. You have that we're losing these family farms at an unprecedented rate. You have all the people who went and testified last year in the legislature right at the end of the session, and almost unanimously, with the exception of one person who wouldn't vote. They were one of those. They pulled a Tulsi Gabbard with the here type thing, present, instead of voting. Everybody else agreed to pass the bill that Jason Neems had to the floor, and then it never got a hearing on the floor. And his was just the medical, because he hasn't taken the steps to recreational. The rhetoric in Frankfurt is so bad. I mean, it's like, I don't know.
Well, I think one of the biggest applause lines yesterday at the legislative forum is when someone mentioned term limits.
Yep.
I think that got the biggest applause out of anything all day.
Right, but I'm so sick. There's non-factual information about cannabis that they keep pushing as a reason to not support it. All studies have shown it's safer for you to smoke marijuana than it is for you to drink alcohol, but alcohol is legal. You have tons of people who get killed every year because they go out on the roads and they drive under the influence of alcohol, and they kill themselves or other people, and this, that, and the other thing. There is not a record anywhere of anybody being arrested for the same thing because of marijuana. That's because they're so paranoid, they're sitting at home on their couch, they ain't driving in their car. But you see what I'm saying? We cannot afford, whether it's the sports betting, casino gambling, marijuana of either type, we cannot afford as a state to close the door on any issue.
Closing doors is never anything that I support. And you're bringing up a good point. Recreational marijuana, medical marijuana, cannabis, they all have potential revenue that they could bring in. Okay, and that we're just speaking on the revenue side. This is a budget discussion. And there's all the good reasons or all the reasons to support medical marijuana. And then there's the positive reasons related to recreational marijuana, and there seems to be enough studies out there. Some of it's anecdotal, is we don't have FDA approval of any of these things. And going back to vaping, there's been no FDA approval of any of the vaping products either. We have things in society that do well, and do well without necessarily all of the approvals and all the studies. We have so much anecdotal evidence about marijuana, and a lot of it is more than that. It's research from other countries, and that the bar has been moved on medical marijuana. We are not going to be able to tax it, and we don't tax pharmaceutical products. Somebody was correct when they made that statement yesterday. But the industry itself will provide the economic activity will provide income based on the workers who work, the dispensaries, everything that happens around, as we know from other states, what happens around the making medical marijuana legal. When you go to recreational, then you can really get into the
big money.
Money. And I mean that in the way that is something that just like alcohol. and other
But
forms of entertainment.
Right. But it's not. That's the problem. It's not just like alcohol. It's not, at all. And the benefits. It helps, people are still using this ridiculous phrase, it's a gateway drug. It's the exact opposite of a gateway drug. Every study has shown that it helps break the cycle of opioid abuse. It doesn't lead to it. It does the exact opposite. It helps, our farmers. It helps bring in revenue. It helps our PTSD patients, our cancer patients, our chronic pain patients. There's like, what's the downside is what I want to say. What is the downside?
Well, you can ask the people who are against it what the downside is.
I don't know. I may wrap myself like in a plant and just be down there every day. This should be our number one. Revenue has to be our number one issue this year. Yeah. It just has to be.
And interesting on the revenue, because something there was a legislative, for people who don't know, there was a legislative forum here in Northern Kentucky this past Saturday. And it had a number of representatives and state representatives, state senators from Frankfort. And one of the things that was, I guess, the narrative that was trying to be pushed was that there's no need for additional revenue. The revenue we have is the revenue we're going to have. And if you're going to fund something, you got to take the money away from someplace else, because we're not going to raise any additional revenues.
Right, which is crazy. They're forcing the state into a system of austerity, which has been proven to be, it's crushing to our economy, despite the crap that they tell us.
Yep.
It's a total lie.
Yep.
Our people are suffering, and here in District 4 in particular, because that's where we all pay attention to, childhood poverty is growing. Childhood homelessness is growing, and people are so wrapped up in their bubbles that they're not paying Northern Kentucky is fine, because people basically view us as a suburb of Cincinnati instead of a part of Kentucky.
Yeah.
And they're
part
not,
of the Golden Triangle.
Yeah. So, this crap about we don't need revenue is just that. It's crap. We desperately need revenue in order to do the things that need to be done.
Something else that changed in 2018 was the change in our tax code, which was going to a flat tax of 5%. And this is something I really do support. And we're not going to change this budget session. It's worth talking about it because it would have a significant impact if we went back to a graduated income and tax rate, and just going from 5 to 7%. Previously, we were 5 to 6.5%. But we stopped at like $150,000, so income over $150,000 would be taxed at 7%. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I just know that currently in the current system, if you're making over $150,000, you're paying the equivalent of about 6%. And if you're making if you're in the bottom 60% of the income earners in Kentucky, you're paying somewhere around 10% in your Kentucky taxes. It's structurally set up the wrong way, and that's the net outcome of the changes that were made in the 2018 tax codes, where we went to more of a consumption-based tax code. So it is a regressive tax. It hurts our working families a lot more than does a graduated income tax. And let's just be fair. I went to Frankfort to try to be fair about everything, every issue, listen to everybody, be fair, and we're not fair in our tax code. No. And that's and
it hurt us. It cost us revenue. What they did cost us revenue.
It still does.
All right. Well, obviously lots going on this session, lots to talk about. I know we could go on here for hours and hours, but we won't. We want to thank Buddy for joining us today and giving us the preview.
Yes, please come back anytime.
I will. Let's do it again.
You'll have to do it after session.
Absolutely. We'll bring you back during that veto break to find out where things are.
Yes, the veto break. Yeah, we call it the veto session is one of the most interesting as it was. I can tell you last year there were 730 something bills were introduced. And before the last 2 days after the veto session, we had passed about 110.
Remember us talking about that.
We talked about
that.
Passed
70 something bills, and most of those bills were a combination of the 600 bills that weren't passed.
Jeez.
So you really do it all comes at the end,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a shell game.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
You guys out there listening, make sure you pay attention to what's going on at the legislative session.
Let's see you down there.
Yeah, go down to Frankfurt, visit them. You can look up the Legislative Research Commission online to keep up with what's going on with bills. And if there's a bill you're specifically interested in, you can actually track that bill. And I also highly recommend the KET legislative coverage. KET does an excellent job. Every day that the legislature is in session, they have a summary that evening of what's happened that day. So highly recommend that. Thank you very much, Buddy. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you all
Thank
for
you,
having
buddy.
me.
Thanks.
Up now, we've got joining us here for our podcast, the lovely and talented Mr. Jason Griffith.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. I'm honored.
Yeah, we're glad you made the trek up here to be here in person in our studios from all the way down in, what county do you live?
Letcher County.
Letcher County.
About a 3.5 hour drive.
So fortunately, we ordered up some nice weather for you today.
That was
So,
nice.
so Jason, you're here to talk to us about some of the stuff coming up, particularly when it relates to expanded gaming, which I understand you've been involved with lately.
Right. Well, I'm part owner and do a lot of GR work for Raven Rock Resort, which is a speculative business right now. But basically, it's part of a border initiative. If you know where Jenkins, Kentucky is, it is literally on the border of Virginia, about 70 minutes north of Bristol, Tennessee. So what we've been advocating for the last couple of years is a constitutional amendment to allow Kentuckians to vote on expanded gambling, some people would call it. And part of our ownership has a big resort that they want to see come into eastern Kentucky to help revitalize the economy, to help serve as an anchor community or an anchor business for the community. A kind of a Jackson Hole, Wyoming was the vision of James, the founder of Raven Rock, who passed away last spring. And also, we have other states around us, like West Virginia. They have the Greenbrier. We have nothing like that here. And so that was, if you've been to it, it's one of the most stunning views because you can literally stand right on the Virginia-Kentucky border where we want to put this, and you see, because it's so high up, you see the sunset set over the thing, over every mountain. And so the city of Jenkins is completely behind it. The community's behind it. And it's part of a 3-phase project, really. The first being the resort casino, the second part being an eco park with dual zip lines and trail rides and horse trails and all sorts of climbing and rappelling and that sort of thing. And then the third part, of course, being some merchant kind of strip mall sort of thing, if you will. Kind of like a Tangier or Tanger outlet sort of thing.
Oh, nice.
So that's what ownership is looking at right now.
Nice, very nice. Okay, so you said you're working on a constitutional amendment. Now, I know that there's also a bill that's been pre-filed about gaming. I guess, do we need a constitutional amendment, or can we just pass a law, or what's...
Okay, well, the governor, we've spoken to the governor before when he was the Attorney General, and he had expressed to us an ownership that it wasn't necessary to have a constitutional amendment. It could be done by statute, but with every bit of respect due to the governor, states that pass gambling through statute and not through an amendment tend to get logjam in court because there's a group called the Family Foundation that goes, oh, well, that's against our values. We're going to hold this up in court. And so the people that have a lot of money invested into this venture go, nope, we're pulling out because we don't want to wait 8, 10, 12 years for a court to make a decision on this. And so, in other states that have passed that as a constitutional amendment, there's nowhere there for them to go. The other thing about the constitutional amendment is it can't be repealed and it can't be changed. So, it can't be easily changed. Let me put it that way. And so that's one of the major reasons for it. And the type of money that this could generate by people bringing in out-of-state money is tremendous. And to put that footprint on it, to solidify it as something that could that could be here for real, that's what we're looking for.
Okay.
That was my first thought, was tourism. I mean, one of the things that a lot of legislators have been hinting at is ways to improve tourism in Kentucky. And we need something like that. We need a site that is popular, that is open year-round, that will draw people here, that will draw money here. Because goodness knows, if you drive right across the border to any casino in Ohio or Indiana, you're going to see more Kentucky license plates than in-state license plates.
That's what Senator Symes said. He says, we already have gambling in Kentucky. You just have to cross the Ohio River to do it. So, we hear from legislators all the time that what will really build the economy here is to have more jobs and more manufacturing. And I would agree with that, but I would also disagree with that because the money doesn't always float down. It tends to float up and those sort of things. And so when we have tourism here, we're bringing external money. I mean, we're surrounded by so many states. And the project we're talking about is, 45 miles from southwest West Virginia, and 70 miles from Bristol, Tennessee. It's a pretty major area. In fact, that's where our news market is in Eastern Kentucky. Most people don't realize that. They think our news market is Lexington, just the same as Northern Kentucky is Cincinnati, Western Kentucky is St. Louis and Memphis. Ours is Bristol, Johnson City, Tennessee. When you look at everybody, with the tax cuts that the legislature passed through the last 2 years, they always say, well, look at Tennessee, look at Tennessee. I said, yeah, but we don't have a Memphis, we don't have a Nashville, we don't have a Gatlinburg, we don't have those tourism things, and that's what's really driving their economy there. Not the regressive tax structure. It's the external money that makes the difference. So
Word.
Good point.
Thanks.
Excellent. So I guess one of the other things I hear, when the conversation comes up about expanded gaming and gambling and whatnot, are the horse racing industry,
right.
And they're going to take away horse racing fans,
which is such crap.
No, it's not. In fact, we've spoken with lobbyists for the industry, or I have, and that's not a concern. It's kind of in business, they always tell you that when you only have one business in town, it tends not to do well. When you have more businesses that do the same thing, they tend to compete against each other, and they bring more people. A perfect example is Las Vegas. If you had just one casino there, and probably wouldn't do so well. But when you're talking multiple, then it becomes kind of a place for people to go to. So, and that's kind of what we say too. And the other thing is that at least with Raven Rock, that it's because of that eco part of it, because this is something that people escape to. It's not, people don't, there's a casino in Bristol, Tennessee that they're trying to get past, and it is literally an abandoned mall. It's a concrete mall. And I said,
we have a mall here that's almost abandoned.
Right.
If that's what we have to compete against and we're worried, then we're definitely in trouble, because the scenery that we have is absolutely breathtaking. We did a job study, and we also did a revenue study that showed in the first year we would generate $330 million for the state pension system. So, that's significant capital. Yeah.
And I would bet there are a lot more people like me who,
there's nobody else like you,
well,
Ann.
yeah,
No.
but,
No.
what I mean by that is I do not go to the racetrack. I don't care for horse racing. Once a year, I turn on my TV to watch the Kentucky Derby, and yay, okay, that's over until next year. However, I have visited several of the casinos, and, the game's there. I love it. You feed off the energy, the adrenaline, what have you. I don't get that same pleasure from horse racing, because horse racing's much more expensive. It's much further away from me personally. Because
Turfway. Well, but Turfway's closed now that they're remodeling.
Right. And it's just not, you wait for this, 2-minute run.
I'm from Louisville, so you're asking the wrong girl
Right.
about
And
horse racing.
I need more than 2 minutes to get my blood going, to get me excited, to keep me,
It's the hats.
Oh, for the
Trust
love of God.
me. It's the hats.
So anyway, that's my point. The average person,
Yeah.
I assume, a lot of people view horse racing, horse betting, and all that kind of stuff as a rich person's game, and not the average guy's game.
I think there's room in the state for both.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
The argument has always been what you've said, that it would cause a problem with horse racing. There's plenty of room for
Well,
it.
in horse racing, right, it's not year-round. You have meets
Exactly.
off and on throughout the year.
Exactly.
And
So
then
there's
they have
plenty-
mutual betting in
Right.
between. Right.
Right.
So, I mean, there's plenty of downtime. And plus, you're also subject to the weather because it's an outdoor event. Even if you have a grandstand you're sitting in, the
Right.
horses, it can
Mudders.
get too dangerous. Yeah,
Love
it can
the
get too dangerous
mudders.
for it to run. But yeah, I think the...
And again, it comes to we cannot afford to close any door
Yeah.
when it comes to generating any kind of revenue for the state and Eastern Kentucky in particular.
Well, this is our argument. Our argument is this: we often get told that we can spend it here, we can spend it here. Why can't we spend it on something that we already have? The lottery. Where I'm from in Eastern Kentucky, we have lots of cockfighting that they've never cracked out on. That people bet on chickens. I mean, we bet on ball games. We bet on all sorts of things. So this isn't really any different.
Right.
You have Red Mile in Lexington.
Yep.
And so the real big difference is they don't have poker, they don't have roulette, they have the machines and that sort of thing. But really, how far isn't an exaggeration to go from one to the other.
Right.
So, and we're talking disposable income. I mean, the majority of people that go here have the means to do so. If it's billed as a vacation and a resort, people do not go to the Greenbrier. They don't go to some of these exotic places because it's their last $5.
Right.
It just doesn't work. So,
Right.
If you only
don't-
have $5, don't go to the
you don't
Greenbrier.
go to Disney World with $5. Right. So,
Oops.
That's funny.
Excellent. So good. Good information there.
there are some. There is a bill pre-filed. I don't know if you want to discuss that or not.
Sure.
Al Gentry's pre-filed a constitutional
Yep.
amendment bill. Actually, that was brought to my attention by you, Roberto, a few weeks ago. Cluster Howard has come out on record as being in favor of it. Funny enough, Damon Thayer actually filed a bill in 2010.
Really?
And it had quite a bit of support. It couldn't get out of committee. Even Senator Smith had added some provisions to it and that sort of thing. So I think when you talk, this is a budget year, the governor's office said that there's a $1.1 billion with a B shortfall for their budget next year. That includes, the $2,000 that's been promised to each teacher, but that also includes that very expensive. And by the way, that the teacher pay raise is about $97 million, not
Right.
billion. But the one that's more expensive than that is the school safety bill. It's tremendously more expensive, but it also you're talking about the $1.1 billion. You got to pay police somehow,
Right.
social services, educating kids, seek money, that sort of thing. So they're going to have to find a way to come up with $1.1 billion. And I don't now. Representative Wheatley that was just here was talking about the two last years they had tax cuts. Those hurt tremendously.
Yeah, the bank tax was
yeah.
one that we didn't talk about when he was here. That hurt too.
Yep. Those definitely added gas to the fire, and so you got to find a way to come up with that. And I don't care. Short of getting rid of all of Frankfurt, I'm not sure how you come up with $1.1 billion in a year. It's a crazy figure.
Here's my thing.
And those are Bevan's numbers. That's not
right.
That's not even
Wasn't
partisan.
it just a couple months ago when Matt Bevan was talking about how we had a budget surplus?
Yeah.
And then
Then on the way out the door with
Yeah, it's
661
surprise.
pardons, and by the way, you got a $1.2 billion shortfall. Good luck with it. So
I don't think he'd recognize. Never mind.
Right.
Anyway, so the other thing that I wanted to talk about was so in case people don't know, last year you were in the primary for Secretary of State.
that's correct.
For the Democratic nomination here. Unfortunately, did not get the nomination.
Or fortunately, depending on who you might ask.
Your wife probably thinks fortunately.
My cars and my pet and my wife and kids say fortunately.
Yeah.
So.
But one of the things that's coming up with our new Secretary of State that is taking office wants to purge the voter rolls. And I was wondering if you could kind of talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, this is not a surprise to me. I mean, this is something that I campaigned on over a year ago when Northern Indivisible had me. Thank you, District 4, for having
You're
me
welcome.
at Amy's house in December of 2018. unfortunately, he has the mandate to do it. And that was upheld in the Supreme Court 3 years ago when John Husted was the Secretary of State of Ohio. And the High Court essentially said that they can do this, as long as the Board of Elections is unanimous with the Secretary of State or whatever their governing body is. And since the previous Board of Elections seems to be already in favor of that, in fact, that was I was there on Election Day when they had their November meeting, and although we couldn't stay for the whole meeting, there was certain parts that were excluded from the public. The Democrat Party had actually filed a lawsuit against the Secretary of State because they had already began a list of 140-some thousand people who had not voted in the last two federal elections. And so when the former Secretary of State, Allison Lonergan Grimes, came in, she said, no, there's no statute that allows us to do this. You just can't go and do this on your own. You did this against me, basically, in the office. And so, to make a long story short, the new Secretary of State has been campaigning over a year and a half that he wants to do that. In fact, and this was what I told people a year and a half ago, that he was the attorney for the Republican Governors Association. So he kind of did help with what happened in Georgia. He kind of did help with what happened in Ohio when that case was taken to the Supreme Court. So he knows what he can do and what he cannot do. And I imagine that a very textbook. In fact, all the candidates for Secretary of State on the Republican side last year said that they favored, I think except for maybe Steve Nipper. I know that Andrew English did. And Carl Nett did, said that they supported the Ohio plan, which was basically that you can, if they don't vote in 2 cycles, you can remove the person without cause. I mean, just simply because they didn't show up. And so I said, well, would it be any different that if the government just took your land if you didn't mow it for 7 or 8 years? Or if you didn't shoot a firearm for 7 or 8 years, could they confiscate that from you? No.
Oh my God!
Because that's a constitution.
Could you imagine?
That's a constitutional right, just like voting's a constitutional right.
Right.
Well, but it is protected at the state level, and that's the problem that we run into is that the General Assembly is basically the end all of that, and so we have to, as a people, work together with the General Assembly to say you can't do this. I know other states have done this, but you can't do this because, the major areas they're going to target right away.
Right.
Yeah, well, the most populous.
Right.
And it's weird how that works out. The most populous ones also happen to vote a certain way.
To be fair, there is a need to go through periodically and clean up your voter rolls.
Of course, but it is not big government intrusion to do it.
Right.
And it's funny that, this particular Secretary of State said it's okay for big state to do that. But it's always been the role of the county clerk, right? And the county clerk regularly scans the obituaries, and they do those things, and they look through, and they have a staff that does that on a regular basis. They do it weekly. They see who's passed away, who's been incarcerated. Of course, the problem being is if someone moves. That's a much more larger part of the problem.
Right.
But the thing is, and this is something we talked about before, if we simply move to an automatic voter registration, when somebody moved to renew their driver's license,
Correct.
their voting precincts moved with them. So it's not even a concern. And
Should we talk about the motivation and why they want to do this? It's really not to clean up the voter rolls.
No.
Because
No,
that's
it's
the
not.
right thing to do.
Cleaning up voter rolls is code word for suppression. It just is. And limiting vote. Mitch McConnell said several years ago, low voter turnout means the voters are happy. And that's not true. I think it's more voter apathy, and they feel that whatever they do, it just really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
So, because when I'm happy about a candidate, I'm sure. I'm like, I know my friend is on the ballot. I'm going to go cast my vote. It may only be one vote, but it might be the vote that makes a difference. So, that's what we're up against.
Yeah.
So, there are people in the state that really want to help, amass some people together to really advocate for people who are marginalized, who might be on the cracks, who have a difficult time, or slip between the cracks, I should say, that won't know when elections are. We had a tough time. 2019, I know that there was a bill that was filed last year that they wanted to make the gubernatorial elections happen every, in even years as opposed to odd. And I know a lot of people say, "Rah, rah, 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 rah," because Democrats weren't in control of the governorship, so they didn't want to think of Matt Bevin being in there perhaps even 12 more months than normal. And so, and I was one of those few people that was actually in favor of it because I thought it was a smart move.
Yeah.
I even said so publicly. It actually saves us money too because
Saves
you're not
us so
printing.
much money.
Yeah, it saves a ton of money, but it also gets more people to the ballot too,
Yeah.
which is more important. And it also gives the county clerk's office a bit to breathe.
Yeah.
The next time they actually get to breathe is 2021.
Right.
So, and it's crazy for them. And they get, 2 years off every 10 years or something? Is that correct?
Yeah.
So it's tough all the way around.
Yeah, I agree. I think it makes total sense to sync up the governors, the state constitutional offices.
Well, and back to what you said too.
Even if we did it on county years, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be presidential years. It can be
Right.
in between.
On
which
the off years.
Actually, I would favor a little better.
Yeah, I
because-
think because then you could still focus more on your state.
Right, because voters get the 7-year itch when
Right.
somebody's been in office 7 years and they'll go the other way. So, I mean, and I would say that for either Republicans or Democrats. I mean, it gives the voters a chance to look the other way every 4 years as opposed to constantly being in line every 4 years.
Yeah.
So,
I think it all goes back to rights too. I so appreciate the analogy that you used. For these stockpilers of weapons who have how many cabinets in their home filled with guns that you can only shoot so many guns so often. But if you've got a cabinet full of guns and you don't shoot any of them for 8 years, what is that? To the equivalent of 2 election cycles? Do we get to take them all away then? Boy, you would never see so much, fire and brimstone and all hell break loose.
Yep.
No one's rights should be taken away simply because they don't exercise them.
right.
It's a choice.
It's a choice. And the thing is, and this is crazy. I mean, you're talking about someone's opinion.
Mhm.
I mean, it's their mind, it's their thought, who they should think they should be elected to office, and to say that we're just going to take that away. There should be, and this is the reason that I favor same-day registration. I mean, there needs to be a checks and balances. Here is something I simply can't understand. I can't understand this whatsoever. When is the last day that you can file to run or file to vote as a Democrat or Republican? What's the date?
December
Oh, December
31st.
December 31st. Okay, so you know what I'm going to ask. When you register to vote for the very first time, when's the deadline for that?
There isn't one.
It's like a month before.
Okay, so if you're a first-term
It's like a
person,
month
now I see what
before.
you're
okay,
saying.
it's 30 days before.
Yeah.
So if you're 18,
Yes.
it's okay. You get 30 days before. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And you're already in the system. But if you're already in the system, no, you've got to be 6 months before that election. So, I mean, those are discrepancies in the law that we can fix. If they can do it for somebody who's never voted before, who's never been registered, why can we not do that for other people as well, too?
I think there's
Fair
a
point.
bill, as I was going through, I'm pretty sure there's a bill that ties it to driver's license. So even when you're 16, you're registered.
You are right. But it
And-
wasn't always that way.
Right.
I mean, before it was tied to that, it was still that you could, up to a month beforehand, still register. So
Right.
it makes it more difficult on the job of the county clerk. How about we do this? How about we move the governor's race to county years, and then that gives them a breather, and then we allow same-day registration.
Yes.
That'd be great, wouldn't it?
I would
That
love
would be.
that.
And we have, and while we're at it, we also add extended voting so that you can
Sure.
vote up
How
to a
about
week.
vote by mail.
Anything that makes it easier to vote.
Right.
Yeah, and even, vote by mail. I mean, absentee voting, right? Here you can absentee vote, but you have to be out of town, so you have to swear.
You have to swear, you know.
They actually give you an oath. You have to swear that you're going to be out of town
Right.
to absentee vote.
There are ways that they can do that and make it authentic. And you could go to a paper ballot. It's possible, but as long as you have clean voter rolls before you institute that. I mean, that's what they ran into in North Carolina because they had paper ballot, but voter rolls were not correct
Right.
before then. So you had tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands, and I don't mean to exaggerate that, but that was the truth. And I think one of those just got decided. I think from 2018 just got decided because so many ballots were sent out to wrong locations. You had to double verify that the person lived there and that the ballot that they received was actually cast in the correct district, and that's a hot mess. So that's the only problem with paper ballots is you have to have that really squeaky clean first, and I don't know that you can get 100%.
Yeah, I mean even if like here in Boone County, right here in Kentucky, if
I'm
going
to
to
mail-in ballot, I didn't mean to say paper
mail-in
ballot.
Yeah, because I was going to say if I absentee ballot, I still have to go to the courthouse,
Right.
to ballot to vote, and somewhere I have to go and learn how to speak before that. I still have to go to the courthouse to actually physically vote there.
Right.
Even though it's an absentee ballot. So, I mean, you could still do that. And if you give people a week and say, okay, it doesn't matter whether you're in town or out of town, you can still vote for the week before the election.
Right.
And now you're still checking to make sure that person's actually who they say they are.
Well, and the other thing is, and we'll just open it up for this, weekend voting. Voting should occur on more than just one single day.
Right.
Because to allow for the myriad of different reasons that people are at work and can't make it on a weekday during those hours between childcare and different shifts that people work and everything else. We need more options.
Well, we do have some options. You can early vote. There are exceptions to that. You want to make it for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Right.
All right. It's possible. I think it costs more. I think that's probably the major reason why that hasn't been, because there is a cost involved. How does I've talked to probably 35 clerks in the last year, and they all complain their budget is too short. They don't have enough people to work rural polls. I guess maybe it would be better if something like that was to be implemented. It could be done in rural places, like one area, like the local courthouse, and in more metropolitan areas, maybe 2 or 3 places where folks could do that. I think that would be an offset, but you couldn't. My goodness, you couldn't have every polling station open for 3 days before the election. That'd be crazy.
Well, and especially because some polling stations are like in schools and stuff like that.
Well, that's true too.
But now there is one place where they tried doing early voting, but because it wasn't at everybody's regular polling place, somebody actually filed a lawsuit and got them to overturn the early voting because the judge said, no, if you're going to have early voting, it has to be in their regular polling place, and they have to be open all the hours.
Interesting.
Yeah, I wish I could remember which state that was. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I just heard that this week on NPR did a report on it.
Well, the courts tend to have the final say on that because they are state level.
Right.
And it's a state decision. So,
yeah. All right. Well, interesting stuff. Good talk.
Encourage your friends to vote.
Yes.
Register to vote.
This is probably, I said this last year, 2019 was the most important election in your lifetime, but I can't see it stressing enough this year. 2020.
And now we're in 2020.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy? This is an important election in both primary and general, both. Drag friends, buy them lunch, whatever you got to do, get them to the polls.
Yep.
So.
I agree. All right.
And if we could advocate for anybody listening that lives in the Commonwealth, if you could contact your legislature and say, hey, look, we really want expanded gaming. We need additional revenue. We don't want to see a tax increase. We don't want to see a cut to public schools. We don't want to see a cut to social services. We don't want to see cuts to fire department. Let us generate our own revenue.
Word.
It's not like we're asking them for a handout. We're
Right.
asking them to let us spend our own money,
Right.
or let us tax people that come into Kentucky.
Right.
So at any rate,
Excellent point. Thanks for coming. Appreciate your time, Jason.
thanks, appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you
Jason.
all. You are the best.
That's going to wrap it up for this week of Left in Kentucky. We want to thank our guests, Buddy Wheatley and Jason Griffith, for coming and sharing their thoughts with us.
Absolutely. Can't wait till they come back.
I loved seeing Jason again.
Yeah. Yeah, they're great. They're great guys. So
Jason needs to run again in 4 years. I'm going to count him every day from now until it's time to run again because he was just the superior, the excellent candidate.
definitely, I agree. And speaking of running, the deadline is this Friday, January 10th. If you want to run for office in Kentucky, and there are still plenty open.
Yes, definitely.
Too many.
Yes, you have until 4 o'clock on Friday to make it to file.
Yep. Any particular offices and there's so many it's hard to know what to list. You can go to the Secretary of State's website and you can see who's filed and who hasn't filed.
Basically, I mean, unless it's somebody that you know really well, there probably isn't somebody running at this point. We've gotten in the habit, our candidates have, not that I completely understand it, of waiting till the very last minute. Why, I don't know. It's not like it's a state secret, but...
Yeah, it has become all the rage to wait till the absolute last minute to file.
Yeah,
It's some deep strategy. If I wait till the last minute, nobody else will file to run against me in a primary.
I guess that's what it is, to try to avoid a primary. I'd be the first one out there saying, "You want primary? Come on, let's dance." But whatever.
Excellent. So there's time to do that. Coming up in our next episode, we have lined up Chris Toby, who will be joining us by phone to talk about the budget this year and get his take on that. He ran for state auditor in the primary last year in Kentucky, so very well versed when it comes to budget. Wrote a little book called Kentucky Fried Pensions.
Yeah.
That if you haven't read, I suggest reading. It really lays out the pension crisis issue in Kentucky very clearly. So he's going to be our guest next time talking about that. And of course we'll be a couple of weeks into the General Assembly, so we'll bring you some of the fun going on with that. February 6th is our next general meeting. Our next monthly meeting is February 6th, and that is our 3-year anniversary.
Woohoo! Yeah. We're toddlers.
I'm making a cake.
Yeah,
Beware.
Awesome. We're officially toddlers, so come join us for that if you can. We would love to see you at our monthly meeting. We'll be at Acapulco Restaurant on Turfway Road, not the one on Mall Road, the one on Turfway Road at 6:30. So that's February 6th. Come join us for that. Then super exciting news coming up on March 5th.
Dun, dun, dun.
We will be having a Senate candidate forum.
Yes.
At Southgate House Revival. We will be having a number of the senatorial candidates running in the primary for the chance to face off against the turtle himself.
Moscow Mitch.
Yet.
So anyway, we'll be we're still confirming with everybody, with the candidates, and we should by our next episode be able to share with you the candidates that will be there.
I have been telling people to save the date.
Yeah. So definitely you want to save the date, March 5th. If you follow us on Facebook, it is on our Facebook page. Because there's limited seating at Southgate House Revival, we are asking you to sign up for tickets through Eventbrite. The link to that is on the Facebook page. We'll also be sending out an email that has that Eventbrite link. The tickets are free. We're not charging for the tickets. But again, with limited seating, we want to make sure that we know how many people are coming and that we have enough seats for everybody since it is there. And the bar will be open at Southgate House Revival as well. So you can get some politics and have a drink or two.
I'll drive you home.
Yeah. Do not buy Amy a drink.
Don't. I don't want to.
Unless you want to end up cleaning much more of your car than you thought was necessary.
Well, I mean, I'll take an iced tea, guys. Not Long Island.
You and I will stay joined at the hip, and anybody that wants to pass a drink that way, I'll just assume it's mine and take it.
Excellent.
Then you can just dump me at my front door.
I'll probably dump you on my couch.
So that again is Thursday, March 5th, starting at 6:30. Doors will probably open around, I don't know, 5:30 or 6, something like that. We're still working out those details, so stay tuned for that. But anyway, that will do it for this week of Left in Kentucky. Hope you've enjoyed yourselves.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. See you in 2 weeks.
Left in Kentucky is the podcast of Indivisible Northern Kentucky.